Across dozens of shattered times, the dream of Apollo turned into a global nightmare, revealing realities where the moon remained untouched and Earth paid a terrible price. In one, an entire generation grew up, believing the sky itself was a deadly radioactive ceiling after a catastrophic atmospheric test. Another saw the most powerful nation on Earth simply cease to exist, its government collapsing under the weight of public despair and recrimination. And in yet another, mysterious signals from the lunar surface went unanswered for decades, their origins and intentions forever unknown. These are just glimpses into worlds spun from a single critical failure: the inability to land humans on the moon. Number 13. The sky became a forbidden zone, patrolled by silent drones. In a timeline designated TR-808, the Apollo 11 mission ended in a horrific explosion just minutes after launch, the debris raining down across a wide swathe of Florida. The psychological impact was immense, but the political reaction was even more extreme. Convinced that atmospheric nuclear testing by rival powers was becoming too risky to monitor from the ground, and with the space program in tatters, the United States initiated Project Sky Shield in 1972. This project involved detonating a series of diagnostic low-yield nuclear devices in the upper atmosphere to study energy dispersal and detection methods. Unforeseen consequence was the creation of a persistent, highly radioactive belt in the ionosphere. International condemnation was swift, but the damage was done. Air travel above 30,000 feet became impossible, globally due to lethal radiation levels. The skies, once a symbol of freedom, became a deadly frontier. Nations developed fleets of heavily shielded, low-altitude cargo airships for international trade. Passenger air travel ceased almost entirely. Above the safe altitudes, a network of solar-powered, silent drones, also part of Sky Shield, patrolled constantly. Their purpose was never officially disclosed, but amateur observers in this timeline noted they occasionally fired energy beams at unauthorized objects attempting to ascend too high or at falling space debris. Children grew up with the knowledge that looking up at the beautiful blue sky was also looking at an invisible, deadly barrier. The dream of reaching the stars was replaced by the grim reality of being trapped beneath a radioactive ceiling of humanity's own making, with silent, unknown guardians ensuring no one tried to breach it. The moon, once a goal, became a distant, mocking reminder of a frontier forever out of reach. Number 12. The Great Lunar Lottery and the Billionaire Hermit on the far side. After Apollo 11 crashed violently during its landing attempt in timeline C-451, the astronauts miraculously survived. However, the subsequent Apollo 12 rescue mission met with an even more devastating fate, exploding on the launch pad and killing the crew. This double tragedy shattered public and governmental faith in large-scale space exploration. National space agencies were defunded into irrelevance. By the 1990s, the moon remained untouched. This void spurred a controversial and unprecedented movement. A consortium of the world's wealthiest individuals, frustrated by governmental inaction, launched Project Artemis Reborn. To finance this colossal undertaking and capture global imagination, they instituted the Great Lunar Lottery. For a modest sum, anyone on Earth could buy a ticket, the grand prize being a seat on one of the first private missions to orbit the moon. The lottery was a staggering success, raising trillions. The first lottery-funded mission, Hope's Orbit, successfully circled the moon in 2003. One of the mission's primary architects and funders, an enigmatic tech billionaire named Seraphina Moon, she had legally changed her surname, had a secret agenda. She had commissioned a small, automated one-way lander, which detached during the mission and set her down on the moon's far side. There, she established a pre-supplied, robotically maintained, self-sufficient habitat. Her stated purpose, broadcast in a single clear message, was to escape the cacophony of Earth and find clarity in the cosmic silence. She communicated only sporadically thereafter, via heavily encrypted data bursts containing complex philosophical arguments and unverified scientific observations. The lottery continued, funding occasional automated supply drops to an anonymous location she designated, but no other human was permitted to land or approach her sanctuary. Her final message, received in 2027, consisted of only 7 words: "I have seen enough. Do not follow." Subsequent foreboding probes dispatched by the concerned Lottery Foundation found her habitat sealed, dark, and outwardly undisturbed. Her ultimate fate and the nature of what she saw remain 2 of that timeline's most profound and unsettling mysteries, fueling endless speculation and a near religious reverence for her solitary vigil among some groups. Number 11. The Luna Ghosts Haunting Global Communications. In timeline designation K19, Apollo 11 suffered a critical guidance system failure during translunar injection. Craft with Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins aboard missed the moon entirely and was slung out into an irretrievable solar orbit. The loss was a profound global shock. The U.S. space program was effectively dismantled within 2 years, deemed too costly and too heartbreaking. The Soviets, seeing an opportunity, fast-tracked their N-1 rocket program. After 3 more catastrophic N-1 failures, they too abandoned manned lunar ambitions by 1975, focusing instead on their Salyut space stations in low Earth orbit. The moon remained unvisited. Then, in the late 1980s, something strange began. Radio astronomers started picking up faint, repeating structured signals, seemingly originating from the lunar surface. They were too weak and too complex for natural phenomena. Because no nation had the capacity or political will to mount a lunar mission, the signals remained a mystery. Dubbed Luna Ghosts by the popular press, these transmissions began to subtly interfere with global communications. At first, it was minor static on long-range radio, then odd data corruptions in the nascent internet of that era. By the mid-1990s, the interference became more pronounced, with specific, recognizable but untranslatable patterns appearing in television broadcasts, financial data streams, and even military communication. No countermeasure proved effective. The source was clearly intelligent, but its purpose was unknown. Some theories in that world suggested it was an automated beacon left by an ancient alien civilization, now malfunctioning. Others whispered it was the collective, psychic echo of the lost Apollo 11 crew. The Luna Ghosts became a constant, unnerving background hum to global technological society, a reminder of a frontier left unexplored and a presence on the moon that no one could identify or silence. The anxiety it generated led to a documented rise in technophobia and a resurgence of pre-industrial philosophies in certain intellectual circles of that timeline. Number 10. The United States fractured into 3 separate nations. The failure in timeline G201 was particularly brutal. Apollo 11 achieved lunar orbit, and the Eagle lander was on its final descent when a software glitch caused its ascent engine to fire prematurely. The lander cartwheeled and crashed, killing Armstrong and Aldrin instantly, all broadcast live on global television. Michael Collins returned to Earth a broken man, a reluctant symbol of catastrophic failure. The recriminations within the United States were unprecedented. Accusations flew between NASA, its contractors, different branches of government, and political parties. Public trust in federal institutions plummeted. The Vietnam War was already dividing the nation, but the moon disaster became a focal point for a complete breakdown of national unity. By 1975, the economic strain, coupled with deep ideological rifts and a discredited federal government, led to secessionist movements gaining unspoken traction. California, Oregon, and Washington formed the Pacifican Republic, citing federal incompetence and a desire to pursue a different technological and social path. A bloc of southern states, resurrecting old grievances, formed the Confederated States of America, focused on agrarianism and isolationism. The remaining northeastern and midwestern states retained the name United States of America, but it was a shadow of its former self, embroiled in economic depression and endless political infighting with its new neighbors. The moon, the once symbol of unity and ambition, became the inadvertent catalyst for the dissolution of the world's most powerful nation. International observers in this timeline documented how former U.S. embassies had to be restaffed with representatives from 3 different, often mutually hostile entities. The global balance of power shifted dramatically with the Soviet Union and a newly assertive European Federation becoming the dominant jadedly players. Number 9. Antarctica became the new space race frontier. When Apollo 11's Saturn, the 5th rocket, exploded on the launch pad in timeline EX4, the disaster not only claimed the lives of the astronauts but also rendered Cape Canaveral unusable for decades due to contamination and wreckage. The public and political appetite for space exploration vanished overnight. However, the competitive Cold War spirit remained. Desperate for a new arena to demonstrate technological and ideological supremacy, both the USA and USSR turned their attention to the last unexplored frontier on Earth, Antarctica. The Antarctic Treaty was largely ignored, as both superpowers poured resources into establishing massive, permanent, and technologically advanced bases on the frozen continent. This ice race led to rapid advancements in extreme environment, engineering, geothermal energy, extraction, and subterranean construction. By the 1980s, vast underground cities, shielded from the harsh surface conditions, dotted Antarctica. They weren't just research outposts. They were fully functioning communities with families, schools, and industries. The primary discovery that shocked this timeline was the uncovering of a colossal ancient ecosystem beneath the West Antarctic ice sheet, teeming with unique extremophile life forms, some displaying rudimentary signs of communal behavior. More disturbingly, deep-core drilling operations by a Soviet base near Vostok Station in 1992 breached a subglacial lake and reported finding geometrically perfect, metallic structures of unknown origin before all contact with the base was lost. An American expedition sent to investigate months later found the Soviet base completely encased in a strange, rapidly growing, crystalline formation. The area was declared off-limits, and the ice race took on a more cautious and fearful tone. The moon was forgotten, but the mysteries found under the Antarctic ice presented a new terrestrial and potentially more immediate enigma. Number 8. Lunar isolationism became a global cult. In timelines 5B, Apollo 11 experienced a near-catastrophic systems failure on the way to the moon. Crew, through heroic effort, managed to return to Earth, but the spacecraft was crippled and the lunar landing was aborted. Subsequent attempts, Apollo 12 and 13, also failed due to persistent, unexplainable technical gremlins that seemed to plague any craft attempting to leave Earth's strong gravitational influence for the moon. After the third failure, a mnemonic but fringe physicist, Dr. Aris Thorne, proposed a radical theory that the moon itself possessed a form of sentience or a protective field that actively repelled human attempts to reach it. He argued that humanity was not meant to leave Earth and that the repeated failures were warnings. His ideas, initially dismissed, gained surprising traction in a world disillusioned by the costly and failed space efforts. Lunar isolationism or thornism rapidly grew from a fringe theory into a global pseudo-religious movement by the late 1970s. Its tenets preached a return to simpler Earth-centric living, a rejection of hubristic advanced technology aimed at space, and a reverence for the sacred boundary of Earth's atmosphere. Followers known as lunarians practiced rituals aimed at appeasing the lunar consciousness and actively campaigned against any further attempts at space exploration beyond low Earth orbit. In several countries, lunarian political parties gained significant minorities in government, successfully lobbying for massive cuts to scientific research deemed celestially intrusive. The most shocking discovery from this timeline is the documented phenomenon of lunar hymns complex, melancholic sound patterns recorded by sensitive audio equipment during full moons, which lunarians claimed were communications from the moon. Mainstream science in that world struggled to explain these sounds, which did not conform to any known natural acoustic phenomena. The movement led to a significant slowdown in technological progress in many fields, as a large portion of the global population embraced a philosophy of deliberate technological stagnation and terrestrial confinement. Number 7. The Soviets built a secret military base on the moon's far side. Timeline Z, 1970, saw Apollo 11 suffer a non-fatal but mission-ending explosion in the service monogule en route to the moon, similar to Apollo 13, but with a less successful recovery. The crew returned but were too traumatized to fly again, and public support for the expensive program waned. The US effectively conceded the moon race. The Soviet Union, sensing a historic opportunity and emboldened by America's withdrawal, secretly poured enormous resources into its N1L3 program. After 2 more initial failures, they achieved a successful uncrewed test, followed by a manned landing in late 1972. Cosmonauts Alexei Leonov and Valery Bykovsky became the first humans on the moon. However, their initial public broadcasts were heavily censored. What wasn't revealed until decades later through declassified documents and defector testimonies from that timeline was the true nature of the Soviet lunar program. Their primary objective wasn't just exploration but militarization. By 1980, the Soviets had established Zvezda Grad, Star City, a heavily fortified nuclear-powered military complex hidden in a large crater on the moon's far side, shielded from Earth-based observation. Its purpose was to serve as a first-strike missile platform and a command and control center for a network of orbiting nuclear weapons. The existence of Zvezda Grad was one of the most closely guarded secrets of the Cold War in that reality. Its discovery by a renegade Chinese robotic probe in 1988 nearly triggered a global nuclear war. The ensuing lunar standoff saw frantic secret diplomatic efforts to neutralize the base without escalating conflict on Earth. The eventual uneasy truce involved joint international oversight of Zvezda Grad's decommissioning, but the revelation that one superpower had successfully and secretly weaponized the moon cast a long, dark shadow over international relations. Number 6. Global air travel was parthied by miniature nuclear Richters. After the Apollo 11 mission in timeline, NR-600 failed due to an inexplicable and complete loss of all radio communication just as it entered lunar orbit. The craft was never heard from again, presumed lost with all hands. Faith in complex remote-controlled systems plummeted. The US government, under immense pressure to show technological dominance, but wary of another high-profile space failure, redirected its massive Apollo-era research and development budget towards a radically different goal. Specifically, they focused on miniaturizing nuclear reactors. By the late 1970s, Project Prometheus had yielded startling success. They developed compact, safe, and incredibly efficient atomic fission reactors, small enough to power individual vehicles. While personal atomic cars were deemed too risky, the technology revolutionized aviation and shipping. By 1985, the skies of this timeline were filled with enormous quiet aircraft, powered by these miniature reactors, capable of flying for months without refueling. International airports became vast energy hubs. The upside was a near elimination of fossil fuel dependence for transportation and a dramatic reduction in air pollution. The shocking downside, however, emerged slowly. Despite safety protocols, minor accidents, leaks, and the cumulative effect of thousands of airborne reactors led to a gradual, almost imperceptible increase in global background radiation. By the early 2000s, health studies in this timeline began to reveal statistically significant increases in certain types of cancers and genetic mutations worldwide. Convenience of nuclear-powered flight came at a subtle, long-term biological cost that the world was only beginning to understand. The dream of the moon was replaced by the hum of atomic engines and a sky that, while clear of smoke, carried an invisible threat. This led to a powerful anti-nuclear movement, but the global economy was by then entirely dependent on the miniature reactor technology. Number 5. The world's oceans were mapped before the far side of the moon. In timeline DS10, the Apollo 11 Saturn V suffered a catastrophic structural failure during ascent, leading to a complete loss of the mission and crew. The subsequent investigation revealed deep flaws in multiple systems, shaking confidence in NASA's entire approach. Funding for space exploration was slashed, and the national focus shifted inwards. President Nixon, in a bid to find a new grand challenge that was less risky and potentially more directly beneficial, announced a massive initiative in 1971, Project Neptune's Realm. The goal was the complete exploration and mapping of Earth's oceans, including the deepest trenches. Resources that would have gone to Apollo missions 12 through 17 and beyond were poured into developing advanced submersibles, underwater habitats, and sonar imaging technology. By the 1980s, this world had incredibly detailed maps of the entire ocean floor, had established permanent research colonies on abyssal plains, and was beginning to sustainably farm deep-sea hydrothermal vent ecosystems for unique biochemical compounds. They discovered thousands of new species and uncovered geological processes that reshaped understanding of plate tectonics. However, the moon remained a distant, blurry orb. Without the impetus of the Apollo program, advanced telescope technology and lunar probe development languished. In this timeline, school children learned the names of submersibles like Sea Serpent, the Seventh, and Abyss Wanderer with the same reverence that children in our timeline learned about Apollo spacecraft. The shocking fact, often highlighted in their history books, was that humanity had established a permanent, self-sustaining city at a depth of 4,000 meters in the Pacific Ocean, Mariana City, by 1995, yet still possessed no detailed photographic map of more than 60% of the moon's far side. The mysteries of the cosmos were ignored for the tangible, albeit equally alien wonders of their own planet's depths. Number 4. A digital great silence gripped humanity. The Apollo 11 mission in timeline CERO failed due to a complete computer systems crash in the lunar module during the final descent phase. The LM drifted helplessly and eventually crashed, though miraculously Armstrong and Aldrin were rescued by an emergency ascent by Collins in the CSM, who performed an incredibly risky and unprecedented maneuver. The astronauts returned as heroes, but the near disaster was blamed squarely on the still primitive nature of digital computing. This event, broadcast live, created a deep-seated public and institutional distrust of complex computer systems. The development of integrated circuits and microprocessors, which were heavily driven by Apollo's needs, stagnated. Instead of a digital revolution, this timeline experienced a great silence in information technology. Research funding shifted towards analog computation, mechanical systems, and human-led processes. There was no ARPANET, no internet, no personal computers as we know them. By the 2000s, global communication relied on advanced telex networks, pneumatic tube systems in large organizations, and highly sophisticated analog radio and television. Libraries were vast physical archives. Computers were room-sized analog devices, tended by specialist engineers, used for highly specific scientific calculations, but never for general data processing or networking. The shocking discovery is the cultural impact. This world had a much slower pace of life, far less information overload, and a documented lower incidence of anxiety-related societal issues. However, complex global challenges like climate modeling or pandemic response, which occurred differently in their history, were severely hampered by the lack of digital processing power. Innovation in fields requiring massive data analysis, like genomics or particle physics, crawled at a snail's pace. The human mind, unaided by widespread digital tools, remained the primary engine of progress, with all its inherent limitations and strengths. The moon remained a dream, and the digital frontier was a path deliberately not taken. Number 3. The missing cosmonaut broadcasts from an empty moon. Timeline. R7X is one of the darkest. Apollo 11 failed catastrophically on the launch pad, setting the US program back years. Seizing the moment, the Soviet Union launched a desperate, poorly tested LK lander mission in early 1970. Cosmonaut Pavel Belyaev reportedly made a successful solo landing in the Sea of Tranquility. His initial broadcasts were triumphant. Then, on his third day during a planned EVA, transmissions abruptly cut out. Official Soviet statements claimed a tragic accident involving a suit rupture. However, years later, with the advent of more sensitive private radio astronomy in that timeline, a shocking phenomenon was detected. Faint, garbled, but unmistakably human voice transmissions speaking Russian began to be picked up sporadically, seemingly originating from the precise coordinates of Belyaev's landing site. The voice patterns were identified by independent analysts as matching Belyaev's known recordings. The transmission spoke of them being everywhere in the dust, of the silence that isn't silent, and pleaded for a rescue that never came. No nation in this timeline had the capability for a manned lunar rescue, and robotic probes sent near the area by the increasingly worried Soviets either failed or returned inconclusive data. The missing cosmonaut became a terrifying global enigma. Was it a series of pre-recorded messages playing on a loop due to a damaged transmitter? Was it a hoax? Or was something else happening on the moon? The official Soviet line remained that Belyaev perished, and the transmissions were a cruel, elaborate prank or misidentified interference. Yet, the broadcasts continued intermittently for over 2 decades. A ghostly voice from an empty, silent landscape, a chilling reminder of the cost of a rushed ambition and an unanswered mystery from a world that never truly conquered the moon. This led to a profound cultural fear of the moon, depicted in their art and literature as a place of existential dread. Number 2. Artificial gravity was achieved before a successful moon landing. In timeline AG 1138, the Apollo 11 mission, along with Apollos A12 and 13, all met with disaster at various stages: launch explosion, translunar trajectory, error, and a failed landing respectively. The sheer scale of repeated tragedies led the United States to formally abandon manned lunar aspirations in 1973, declaring it an cursed endeavor. The immense scientific and engineering talent, along with the colossal budgets previously allocated to the Apollo program, were controversially redirected into a single highly classified research initiative, Project Icarus. Its audacious goal was the development of controlled artificial gravity. The reasoning was that mastering gravity would make space travel inherently safer and more feasible in the long run, bypassing the need for massive, unreliable chemical rockets. For 2 decades, Project Icarus operated in total secrecy. Then, in 1995, the world was stunned by a demonstration. A 10-ton steel sphere was levitated and maneuvered within a secure Nevada facility, seemingly defying gravity. By the early 2000s, this timeline saw the emergence of prototype gravitic lifters, silent, platform-like vehicles capable of vertical takeoff and landing, and highly efficient atmospheric flight. The focus was initially on terrestrial applications, revolutionizing transport and construction. The Moon, and indeed most space exploration, was largely ignored, seen as an old, failed dream. The shocking discovery isn't just the artificial gravity itself, but its societal impact. Cities began to be designed with verticality in mind. Personal grav flyers became a luxury item, and the concept of up and down became more fluid. However, the energy requirements for the gravitic generators were immense, leading to a desperate global search for new power sources. Furthermore, subtle long-term physiological effects of exposure to localized, intense gravitational fields on human biology began to be documented, raising new and unforeseen health concerns. They could manipulate gravity, yet the Moon, easily reachable with such technology, remained a symbol of past failure and was almost never visited. Number 1. Earth received an ultimatum from lunar guardians. That went unanswered. Timeline PH1 presents perhaps the most unsettling scenario. Apollo 11's landing module, the Eagle, touched down successfully. Armstrong and Aldrin took their first steps. Then, approximately 2 hours into their EVA, all video and audio transmission from the Moon ceased abruptly. For several agonizing hours, Mission Control tried to re-establish contact, to no avail. Command Module, piloted by Collins, reported no visual on the LM from orbit, only an unusual localized shimmering near the landing site before it passed over the horizon. Collins returned to Earth alone. The world mourned. Conspiracy theories were rampant. Then, exactly 1 lunar cycle, 29.5 days, after the loss of contact, every active radio telescope array on Earth simultaneously received a powerful, complex, and clearly artificial signal. It wasn't from the Apollo 11 landing site, but appeared to emanate from a point on the lunar far side. The signal, once painstakingly decoded over several months by a united global effort of linguists and cryptographers, contained a clear message in multiple Earth languages, including perfect archaic Sumerian, Latin, and modern English. It stated that the Moon was a protected sanctuary, or quarantine zone, that the Apollo 11 intrusion was a violation, and that any further attempts by humanity to land any object or organism on the lunar surface would result in unspecified retaliatory consequences against Earth. The message included incredibly detailed astronomical data about Earth's solar system and galactic neighborhood that was far beyond 1969 human knowledge, seemingly as proof of superior capability. It ended with a repeating phrase: "You have been warned. Acknowledge and comply." No government in this timeline officially acknowledged the message's authenticity, publicly dismissing it as a sophisticated hoax or natural phenomenon. Privately, all further lunar missions were indefinitely suspended worldwide. No reply was ever sent. For decades, humanity in this timeline lived with the silent, unanswered ultimatum from the lunar guardians as they became known in hushed whispers. The Moon, visible in their night sky, transformed from a symbol of aspiration into a source of immense, unspoken dread, and a constant reminder of a line that was crossed, and a warning that hung unanswered over the entire planet. All subsequent deep space probes were carefully routed to avoid any lunar flybys, and a de facto global agreement of non-interference with the Moon was silently adopted. The nature of these guardians, their capabilities, and their patience remained terrifyingly unknown.